this is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you're in the right place. Welcome to our flower series. In this video, we'll be piping buttercream leaves. It's broken down into steps so you can skip ahead, rewind, and rewatch as desired. For color mixing today, we're just going to make one shade of green. And this will be an easy one to make to pipe our leaves. We're going to use two colors, royal blue and lemon yellow, and those are both liquid gels. We're going to use kind of equal amounts of them. We're just going to make a nice little true green today. You can see I've got some buttercream in my bowl. We're using an American style buttercream, but you could use whatever you want for this. So I'm just going to start with 1 drop of my lemon and 1 drop of my royal. And using equal amounts of these two colors is a nice way to get yourself a great true green. And it's just one of those things where the more color you use, the darker the hue will be. And every once in a while, those drops are a little unequal, so just give them a mix around. Maybe a dab more of one versus the other. I think my drop of blue was just a little bit bigger than my drop of yellow. So I ended up with a shade that's just a little more towards the blue. So if I want to kind of even it out a little bit, I'm just going to add just a tiny touch more yellow. It's one of those things. If you have about equal amounts, you're going to end up with what kind of feels like a nice kind of true green that's kind of in the middle of those two colors. If you add more yellow, it'll be more citrusy. And if you add more blue, kind of be more of like a Kelly green. It's a nice shade there for our leaves today. For our lesson today, we're going to use one bag. It's a 12-inch disposable, and you can see we've got a coupler on there because we're going to use 2 tips. The first is a number 352. The second is a number 104. First, we're going to do basic leaves. We're using tip number 352. That's the one with that nice V-shaped opening. They're really easy to make leaves with. And we want to hold it so that one of those points on that V shape is just touching the surface we're working on. You can make these on a flower nail, or you can make them directly on your projects like cakes. You just want to have one of those points touching the surface and the other one coming kind of like straight up from it. So if you're thinking about the top of a cake, one point's touching the top, the other one is pointing straight up into the sky. If you're doing something on the side, it would be touching the side and the other one would be out coming towards you. So you just want to hold it perpendicular to the surface you're working on. The bag we're going to hold at a 45-degree angle, and that's going to allow that frosting to flow out from the opening of this tip. And we're going to hold the back of the bag just in whatever direction that we're pulling. Today, for our example, it's going to be towards 3 o'clock. But this is one of those things that you can really go wild and work on your projects with. So you might want to change up the back angle of the bag and pull those leaves in a lot of different directions. So all we're going to do to make these is squeeze and hold still. And that's going to allow that frosting to balloon out and make our leaves just as wide as we want to. And whenever you hit the width that you want, then we're going to pull quickly and we're going to pull along the angle that we're holding the bag. And that's going to lift that tip up off the surface that we're working on. So it's going to give us a nice fat base with a nice taper to a point if we do it correctly. The key there is just to kind of hold still when we start. That allows the frosting to attach, to build up a nice fat base. And when we hit that width, we're just going to pull away quickly, and that's going to create that point as some of the frosting pulls out there. And this is one of those ones where you want to still be squeezing while you pull away because we want some frosting to come out of that tip. So it's kind of the exact opposite of what we do with a lot of our piping, where we're looking for clean, blunt finishes, where you want to stop squeezing before you pull away, right? So we're going to do the exact opposite here. And these can be done, as we've said, directly on your projects, or you can make them ahead on your flower nail, which is what we're going to do now to give you a nice close-up example. Let's make a basic leaf. I've got my flower nail. I've put some parchment on it so I can move it off my nail when I'm done. And I've got my bag with my tip ready. So we've got the number 352. We're going to take it and touch one of those points to the surface. The other one is going to be facing straight up. We're holding our bag at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to pull off towards my right side, so towards 3 o'clock. So that's where I've got the back of the bag pointed. So we're just going to squeeze with nice firm pressure, let the frosting balloon out, and when I hit the length I want, pull away quickly. And you can see that makes a nice little tapered leaf for us. Our next step on our little leaf journey is going to be to make some veined leaves. These are also going to be using our number 352, so same tip on the bag. We're going to set ourselves up just like we would for the basic leaf. So think 45 degrees, one of the points of that leaf tip touching the surface, the other one straight up. And I'm going to hold my back of my bag to 3 o'clock. But again, these are just like the other ones where you can do them kind of in any direction when you're working on a cake. So you can change up the back angle of the bag depending on which direction you want to pull in. But for our purposes today, we're just going to use the 3 o'clock position over on the right side and pull that direction since it's nice and easy for us. I'm right-handed. The main difference here is we're going to squeeze and hold to build up the width of our leaf, but then instead of pulling away directly, we're going to wriggle the bag back and forth. So think about kind of like a little jiggle movement. We're going to pull away from the base of our leaf and then squish back towards it just a little bit. And what that's going to do is make these nice little lines or wrinkles in the frosting that's going to build up the look of veins. When you hit the length that you want, so you can kind of really alter the length of these as well, you're going to then pull away quickly. So we're just adding a little extra step there in the middle to build up some length and also some detail by giving it the look of veins. These are also great for doing directly on your projects. You can kind of pull them in any direction, or if you want to prepare some ahead of time, chill them and then put them on your projects, you can make them on your flower nail as well. And we're going to do that now as some practice and also to give you an up-close view. Let's get set up for our veined leaves. I've got my flower nail ready. I've got a little bit of paper attached to it, some parchment paper with just a little bit of buttercream. I've got my bag at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to make sure one of the points of that 352 tip is touching the surface and the other one is pointing directly up. And I'm going to pull off towards 3 o'clock. I'm going to give it a nice squeeze, let it build up a nice width, and then just wriggle. So you can see I pull away and squish back into it. And that's going to create the nice look of veins. When I hit the length I want, I then pull away quickly while still squeezing to finish it off. And you can see that gives me the look of a nice little leaf that's kind of resting on the surface, and the end has a little bit of style and flair where it kind of pulls up off away from the surface. And you can see you have that nice little bit of texture and detail there where it gives us the look of veins on our leaves. Now we're going to make some of what I call flat leaves. These are a little bit bigger. They maybe look a slightly more realistic in terms of their shape and their overall size. And they're a great one to kind of have in your pocket for when you want something that ends up being bigger and having a little more presence than, say, a basic leaf. But they're also great to use in combination as well. We're going to be using our 104 tip for this one. And the bag setup is just a little bit more, not, I would say complicated, but there's a little bit more to it. So we're going to start at 45 degrees with the angle. The back of the bag is going to be pointing towards 130. So if you think clock face, 12 is right there pointing directly away from you, you just want to be a little off to the right side for this. If you're a lefty, just flip it and do the reverse. The fat end of the tip of opening is going to be anchored directly in the middle of our nail, so right on that midline, and the skinny end then will be pointing out, and you just want to rock it up off the surface a little bit. So there's a little bit more to kind of think about and consider to help get yourself started, but once you do them, they're actually really easy, and it should kind of flow naturally with just a little bit of practice. So when we pull, we're going to pull away from ourselves on the surface of the nail. And as we do that, we're going to rock the back end of the bag towards 3 o'clock. If you're working on your flower nail, you can also spin your nail to kind of ease that. That'll mean you have to travel less with your hand. And I find doing the combination of the two, moving my bag a little bit and turning my nail a little bit, is just what I need to do. So as I pull away, we're executing that turn. That changes where the angle where the opening of the tip is positioned, and allows us to pull to a point. So we start out kind of fat and wide, and as we pull away from ourselves and turn, we're altering where the opening of the tip is oriented so that we can pull to a nice point there. When you hit that point at the top, just take a moment of pause, and then we're going to pull back in the direction towards ourselves, so in the other direction. First we go away, then we come back, and we're going to rotate and change the angle of our bag, the bag positioning again. So we'll go from kind of 3 o'clock to 4:30. So think about kind of pulling away as we rotate that back end towards ourselves, and then as you pull towards yourself, you're going to rotate a little more. So it might take a little bit of work and a little bit of practice on your part to see what you're more comfortable with. Are you more comfortable moving that kind of clock position of the bag, so where the back end is, or are you more comfortable rotating your nail? And you'll probably end up with some combination of the two. Now for these, unlike the ones we've done before, our basic and our veined leaves, I find it's easiest just to do them on your flower nail, chill them, and then place them on your cake. If you try to do this where you're trying to kind of rotate that back into your bag and get into some funky positions, especially if you're working on complex arrangements, it can be just a little bit too much sometimes. So I like to prepare these in advance, have them chilled and ready to place on with just a dab of buttercream. Now we're going to make some of our flat leaves. We are going to set up our bag first. So we're at 45 degrees. The back end of the bag is kind of at 1:30. So you see 12 o'clock would be there. We just want to do a nice little bit off to the side over here, over to the right. I'm going to put the fat end in the center of my nail. And right here is the middle. I'm going to come down below the metal, but think just on that midline. The skinny end, now because we've got ourselves set up correctly, is pointing out towards the outside edge of my nail. And I just want to make sure that that skinny end is up off the surface. So just rock it up a little bit. Now we're going to pull and we're going to rotate our nail and the back end of the bag towards 3 o'clock as we go. So to start with, just pull up. When you get about halfway, start rotating and pull to a point. Once you make your point, the back end of your bag should be kind of almost towards 3 o'clock. We're going to pull back towards ourselves and rotate at the same time. And you can see that makes a nice, broad, flat leaf. Next up, folded leaves. We're also using tip number 104 for these. And these are going to be a lot like our flat leaves, except they're going to have the appearance of being like kind of folded, like they're not really laying flat on the surface. It's going to give it a little dimension, and it's going to give them kind of maybe even a cupped appearance when you place them on your cakes. So we're going to start out set up just like we did with our flat leaves. So think 45-degree angle with the bag, back end towards 130. The fat end of the opening of the tip is going to be anchored there in the center, skinny end pointing towards the outside of the nail, and just rocked up off the surface a touch. We're going to do the same kind of method for the first side of this. So we're going to pull away from ourselves, rotating our nail and our bag clock position as we go to create the point. The difference comes in when we get to that point. When we start to pull back to ourselves, we're going to rotate so that we're at 6 o'clock. So I think the back end of the bag is going to be pointing directly towards us. That way when we pull, we're pulling a nice ridge back. So it's going to give the leaf a look like almost like a book that's half open. So when we go to finish it, because it might be a little awkward there at the end, what we're going to do is then rock the bag angle. Keep getting mixed up even with myself. We're going to rock that from 45 degrees to 90. So it's going to be a little awkward there, probably for the first few times you do these, but they look really nice and they give your kind of arrangements on your cakes a little bit of dimension and depth because everything's not too flat and not too static. And it's a great one to actually combo with the flat leaves. You can use the same tip, the same bag, and even the same color, but just play some flat and some folded to give your arrangements just a little more depth and dimension. This is also another one that's going to be easiest by far to complete on your nail because of how you're holding your bag. Now it's time to make some folded leaves. We're gonna get ourselves set up first. You can see I've got my nail. It's got a little bit of parchment on top so I can move my leaves off easily when I'm done. Bag is at 45 degrees, back end is at 130. I've got the fat end anchored there at the center and I'm below the middle because I want to pull a nice long leaf. And the skinny end is facing out towards the outside edge of the nail, and it's also rocked up off the surface. And I'm going to start just the same as I did before. Pull away from myself, rotate, and pull to a point. Now, when I'm going to pull back, you want to make sure that you pull the back end of the bag towards 6 o'clock so that when you pull towards yourself, you get a nice ridge. And you can see there at the end, I rock up to 90, and that gives us a nice little tapered end. And you can see that makes a nice folded leaf. You get a little bit of dimension, right? It's kind of rocked up and you've got that nice little ridge there. And it gives you a beautiful little look to those that you can put on your cakes directly like this. Or once they're chilled, you can position so it has a nice V-shaped kind of look to it and has a little depth. And that'll give your arrangements just a little bit of extra interest, a little extra variety that's kind of in a way almost artificial. We're basically using the same technique and the same tips. You can even use the same colors. Just a little bit of alteration in how you move gives it a completely new look and feel. And finally today, we're going to do some ruffled leaves. This one, we're also going to use a tip number 104. They're pretty easy to do, and for me, they always kind of have the look and feel maybe of sort of like oak leaves, where they have these nice little kind of teardrop shapes to those kind of protrusions on them. I'm sure that part of the leaf has an actual name. I don't know it, but they're really simple to make. We're going to hold the bag at 45 degrees, back end off towards 3 o'clock because that's easiest for me since I'm right-handed. If you're a lefty, just reverse it and do 9. The fat end is going to be in the center. The skinny end is just going to be facing out and kind of up off the surface. And what we're going to do is basically pipe loops, however you want to think about them. Loops, teardrops, curves, whatever works. But I just want to kind of draw that shape with the outside edge of that tip, so with the skinny end, and I like to keep it to odd numbers, so think 3, 5, that's always a great one to do, but draw some out to the side. So if you're going to do 5, I would do 2 off to the left side, and then do 1 up at the top, and you can turn your nail as you're doing this, or rotate your hand as you're working. Do 1 at the top, and then do 2 more down the other side. If I was going to do a smaller one and I just wanted to do 3, I do 1 in the middle, and 1 off to the side. So pretty easy. You can also mix up the size of these by making them have more of those little loops. Just remember to give yourself 1 on the end and it'll look great. It gives you kind of that nice loose look of ruffled foliage. I really like using them in fall designs, but they really work for anything. And it gives it just a little bit of extra interest. And gives you a different style to use versus some of the basic ones or flat ones. That gives you a different look. And it's also great for taking up a lot of area because you can kind of do several of these and take up some space. So these you can do on your nail or even directly on your projects. We're going to make our ruffled leaves now. So I'm going to set my bag up. I'm at 45 degrees. I'm off towards 3 o'clock. I'm going to anchor the fat end in the center, and I'm going to have the skinny end pointing out with the kind of edge right up off the surface. So we want just a little bit of distance between the surface of our flower nail and the skinny end of the opening of the tip. And I just want to start kind of below, right on the bottom area of my nail to give myself space to make a nice big leaf. And I'm going to do a little 5-loop ruffled leaf. So just think, draw a loop, a second one at the top, and you can see I just rotate my nail as I need to move and move down. And there we go. A nice, beautiful ruffled leaf. You can see it has a very different feel because it has those soft little curved edges to it. It also, too, because of the way we move the tip, gives the look of veins in the middle. So these have a little bit of interest, a little bit of movement, just a tiny bit of depth to them because we're holding the skinny into the tip, just up off the surface, so they'll have a little bit of depth to them too. And they just have a nice kind of alternate look for some leaves, and they're a great way, as you can see, to quickly cover up some space if you're trying to make larger arrangements. That's all for today's lesson on these 5 great styles of leaves. These are a great introduction to leaves if you want some interest in variety and you're also a beginner. We used 2 tips to create 5 different unique styles of leaves. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to check out some of our other great tutorials, we recommend trying things like our basic rose and daisy. They're great introductions to flowers to pair with these wonderful little leaves you just learned. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecoratingschool.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.